5 years ago, I learned I carry both genes for Alzheimer's, and my risk was 90% by age 80 if I did nothing, and I was terrified.
The area that's been greatest failure has been neurodegeneration. If you get Alzheimer's or Lewy body or frontotemporal dementia or ALS, any of these things, we have nothing to offer.
But then I learned about Dr. Bredesen, and I felt so much hope. Though Alzheimer's, America's most feared disease, was once believed to be a death sentence, today research is showing that it might be optional.
We've treated over 10,000 patients now. We know that in our trial, 84% of the people got better.
Though the media has called him a quack, and most neurologists won't even discuss his protocol with their patients,
still, as they say, the pioneers are the ones with the arrows in their backs.
Dr. Bredesen's results speak for themselves.
In medicine, we want to focus on the outcomes, not on the incomes. Unfortunately, sometimes incomes are more important than outcomes.
And what I've learned from his work could save your brain or the brain of someone you love.
Every
1 in 10 Americans
seconds,
over the age of 65 suffers from Alzheimer's disease.
For loss of memory,
loss of brain
language,
function.
problem
Alzheimer's
solving.
is the sixth leading cause
They're
of
death
death.
sentences.
Is it reversible? Can we do something?
At present, there's no
Stop it.
cure.
So we want to treat our brain.
But there is hope.
That cognitive
Alzheimer's,
decline can
dementia.
be prevented and reversed.
So today, we're exposing the myths around Alzheimer's, revealing 7 simple steps you can take to help your brain age gracefully and maybe even reverse cognitive decline, and the 4 blood tests that can detect Alzheimer's decades before symptoms appear. So stick around to the end because I'm sharing exactly where to get these tests, no doctor required, so let's dive in. Right now, over 5 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's, and billions have been spent searching for a cure to no avail. So I sat down with Dr. Bredesen, a professor at UCLA who spent 30 years studying neurodegeneration, the first doctor to ever reverse Alzheimer's, and asked him, what's going wrong?
2 things wrong. Number 1, the understanding of the disease is outdated. People say, oh, it's caused by amyloid. You make amyloid for no apparent reason, then that causes the disease. Well, it is a mediator. It's just like saying, when your cytokines get activated because you're having an infection. Oh, it's the cytokines that are causing the problem. No, it's the infection that are causing you to make the cytokines.
So let's talk about the drugs currently being prescribed. Lecanemab, one of the newest Alzheimer's drugs approved by the FDA. What should people know?
They slow the decline. That's the best thing that they do. How much do they slow? Leqembi that you mentioned, in women, 11%, almost nothing. In men, it actually did a little better. In people who are ApoE44, it didn't help them at all. And there's some evidence that it made them worse than nothing.
So people with the highest genetic risk, like me, with both ApoE4 genes, these drugs could actually make us worse?
It's recommended every day by doctors who realize that there's publications showing that it didn't help the 4/4s, but they still recommend it.
And the side effects?
And then it also causes brain swelling in many people. It causes brain atrophy in many people. And then unfortunately, it's caused several deaths.
And there's also been controversy about how the first of these drugs, aducanumab, was approved.
There was an 11-member independent board. 0 of the 11 recommended approval. They all said, no, there's not enough effect. It's got too many side effects. Do not approve this drug. The FDA was convinced by the corporate entities, approve it anyway. And 3 of the 11 members resigned in protest over that.
But there's also something else you need to understand about these drugs regarding the difference between statistically significant versus clinically meaningful.
So as they've pointed out, the effects of these antibodies are not clinically significant, they're statistically significant. So what happens is they're using 1,500 or 2,000 people because there's such a tiny effect that it takes that many people to find statistical significance. But when you say, well, is it clinically meaningful? Do the families notice any difference? The answer is no.
But here's where this story gets hopeful. While conventional medicine focuses on one target, amyloid, Dr. Bredesen's discovered something revolutionary after 30 years of studying neurodegeneration.
We were starting to set up the first drug trial. Well, wait a minute, what about these other pieces? Should we also do brain training? Should we also do exercise? I was sitting in my office looking at the big whiteboard and writing these different pieces. And then, of course, it just hit me like, wait a minute, why would you leave anything out when you're talking about changing this amazing network in your brain?
So instead of one drug for one target, he created a comprehensive protocol addressing every factor that damages the brain.
The very first patient who came to see me was in April of 2012. Her mother had died of Alzheimer's. She had just been diagnosed herself. And her friend sent her out and called me up and said, could she come out to see you? We work with mice and fruit flies and cells. I'm not sure I could help a human. And so she said, well, just please talk to her. So we spent 2.5 hours. She took all these notes, and I thought I would never hear from her again. And she got much better. She's now done 13.5 years. She's still doing well. She is walking across the United States to raise awareness that cognitive decline can be prevented and reversed.
Yeah, I've not felt bored at all. I mean, there's just so much to think about. And it marks the 13th anniversary when I first started on the real journey, which is a journey to wellness, a journey to recover from my memory loss. The protocol that I'm following was developed by Dr. Dale Bredesen.
Cauliflower rice, yum. I didn't even have to go fishing for the salmon.
I'm out for another day of fun on my walk across America.
Judy went from early dementia to walking 2,000 miles across America 13.5 years later, and that's not supposed to be possible.
Well, we've had a tremendous amount of pushback because we're saying something that hadn't been said before. We're saying that, yes, there is something you can do about this. And so we went from anecdotes, then we published 100 people with documented improvement. Then we did a proof of concept trial next, and that was published in 2022. That was successful. We had unprecedented improvements. And now we're just finishing a randomized controlled trial. And the difference between the control group that's just going downhill and the treated people who are going uphill is just striking and highly statistically significant. So that'll be published in a few months.
So let's talk about specifics. How does your protocol compare to the drugs?
It is 8.5 times the treatment effect of this recent so-called US pointer trial, 6.5 times as effective as the drug Leqembi, and 3.5 times as effective as the drug donanemab, which is called Kisunla.
And his real-world results are also pretty incredible.
Trials, about 80% of people improved. In general practice, the people that have been trained, we're looking at more like 50%. But again, the earlier you start, the easier it is, the more complete it is.
So to be clear, 84% of people got better, not slower decline, better, improved cognition. And this matters to me personally because I have both ApoE4 genes, which means I have a 12 times increased risk of Alzheimer's, and learned my risk was 90% by age 80 if I did nothing. Now there are 7 million Americans just like me, 75 million more with one copy, a 30% risk, and even with 0 copies, 9% risk. So 1 in 3 seniors gets Alzheimer's. This is everyone's problem. But here's what changed everything for me.
Even though there's this 90% risk, that's if you do nothing. If you do the right things, we should be able to get it close to 0.
Genetics tells us your risk, not your destiny.
And we have a patient now, 67-year-old man, who had already had MCI. So he's already at the 3rd of 4 stages. Got treated, improved with his cognition. His ASL before he started was clearly abnormal, classic for Alzheimer's. You see this reduction in blood flow in the area called the precuneus, and that's what he had. Then, after he was on the protocol for several years, and it was dramatic improvements, he has a completely normal ASL. I don't think that's ever been documented before.
Brain shrinkage, reversed. In other words, your brain can heal. So now let's talk about how.
So I ran a lab for 30 years looking at the molecular details of what drives the neurodegenerative process. This is a network insufficiency. So there are all these mechanisms that contribute, but what they're driving is when you have various insults, you switch from connection to protection. And so now you make the amyloid that kills the microbe. It's helping to protect you as you go from connection to protection.
So amyloid and tau aren't the disease, they're the response.
Imagine that you have tuberculosis and your body's responded to that by making these various so-called granulomas. Just sucking out the granulomas is not that great of an idea as long as you continue to be exposed to the TB. The granulomas are fighting the TB. So the amyloid is fighting these various insults, and we want to do both. Fine to get rid of the amyloid, but make sure you've gotten rid of the insults as well.
You talk about 36 holes in the roof. What does that mean?
Most of these things are grouped into three main areas. It's things that reduce your energetics, reduce blood flow, reduce oxygenation, reduce mitochondrial function, all of that. It's increased inflammation, all sorts of organisms and leaky gut and sinusitis and things like that. And then it's increased toxin exposure. And that's the inorganics like air pollution and mercury. It's the organics like microplastics, glyphosate, toluene, benzene, stuff like that. And then it's the biotoxins, things made by organisms like mold species, for example. So if you address those three huge areas, that's when we see the best outcomes.
And this is why single drug approaches don't work.
A drug could be a great way to close one hole, but what about the other 35? You gotta not forget those. So as we start doing this, you get to a certain point where you now get over the threshold and now they all snap shut. Things are better. You've gone back into connectivity and away from just focusing on protection.
So what can people actually do? Here are the 7 basics. Step 1 equals diet. What is the worst thing for your brain?
Eating a standard American diet. Ultra-processed food, you're actually damaging your gut. You're changing your oral microbiome. You're reducing your ability to detox, reducing your fiber consumption. You're reducing your phytonutrients, your polyphenols. So you've got all these different mechanisms. You're creating inflammation. You're creating liver damage. You're creating, visceral fat. Got this metabolic syndrome with ongoing systemic inflammation. And inflammation in your brain is what's driving you into this state where you're now downsizing. So it's essentially giving yourself Alzheimer's.
So what should we eat?
KetoFlex 12-3. Here's what that means. It's a plant-rich, mildly ketogenic diet. The 12 is the minimal fast and 3 hours of fasting before bedtime.
What does a plate actually look like?
You look at the plate, it should have mostly multiple colors of vegetables, leafy greens, and then you can have some protein as well. Some, of course, are going to like to do that with beans and do it with tofu. Others will want to do it with pastured chicken or with wild caught fish. And
what about the most important foods to avoid?
Avoid dairy because it can be inflammatory. Avoid grains because they can also be inflammatory and can cause gut issues for some people. And avoid simple carbs. Those are kind of the big 3 that you want to be really, really careful about.
And you've mentioned ketosis. So why is it so important?
So here's what's interesting about your brain. It's like a hybrid. So it only functions on 2 things. It functions on glucose, it functions on ketones. Now, for most of your life, you're doing well. You're using the glucose. Now you go to bed, your glucose is going down, your ketones kick in, you're fine. You go back and forth. So you're metabolically flexible. When we see people with cognitive change, even early on, they typically have lost both of those. You have a metabolic emergency.
So dropping insulin low enough by reducing carbohydrates enables the production of an alternative fuel source, ketones, which can fuel your brain during this energy crisis. And what about the fact that over 90% of us are missing key nutrients for brain function?
Most of us are deficient in potassium, many in iodine, magnesium, zinc, and choline. Those are the big 5. Choline is one of the common ones that's too low for most of us. And guess what? It's critical for acetylcholine, which is low in Alzheimer's and is the critical transmitter for memory. higher cholinergic diet. You can get it with pastured eggs. Liver is another good source.
Steps 2 through 5 are all about lifestyle. So let's rapid fire through the next 4. First up is exercise.
Exercise. It's a huge impact on cognitive decline. You need the blood flow. You need the insulin sensitivity that it helps to give you. You need all that aerobic support and the strength training. So exercise is huge.
Step 3 is sleep.
So sleep, you want to track 4 things. So you want to have at least 7 hours of sleep at night, 90 minutes of REM, 60 minutes of deep sleep, and you want to have at least an SpO2, in other words, your oxygen saturation of 94%. If you hit those 4 things every night, you're doing great with your sleep. And if there's any question, please get checked for sleep apnea. It's easy. You can do it at your own home now. 80% of sleep apnea goes undiagnosed.
Step 4 is stress.
We were made to do acute stress resolution, acute stress resolution. Humans handle that very well. We were not evolutionarily designed for stress, chronic, unremitting stress. And so many of us have all the issues that are just contributing to this chronic, unremitting stress. No, you've got to get away from that. Just, chill.
Brain stimulation, basic detox support, and targeted supplements like resveratrol and omega-3s round out the 7 steps. Now, this might be the most important part of the entire video because early detection is everything. And you can detect Alzheimer's decades before symptoms appear. And you don't need a doctor's order.
Now, you mentioned blood tests. So yeah, there's 2 types, as I mentioned. One is, where do I stand? One is, where am I headed?
Okay, so tell us about the Where You Stand blood tests.
Where do I stand? There are now 4, thank goodness, because it used to be you had to have a spinal tap. I mean, do you want to have a spinal tap every couple of years? I don't. So you can get these 4 blood tests. p-tau 217. Make sure, and there are some very sensitive ones. I happen to like neurocode because it's got the most sensitive, but there are others. Then the second one is A-beta 42:40 ratio. So it's 42:40 ratio. That goes down as you're heading for Alzheimer's. The third one is GFAP, tells you if you've got inflammation in the brain. And then the fourth one is NFL, neurofilament light. That tells you whether you have damage to the neurons. The great news is you put those together, you get a beautiful profile of what's going on inside your skull. You can go on getabrainscan.com and get those tests.
And what about where you're headed?
And the easy thing to do there, go on to mycqtest.com. So that's a free online cognitive assessment. It's about 20 minutes or so. It tells you, are you struggling? Because these things do tend to sneak up on you. And then it will tell you, okay, which blood test do you need for that specific result that you have?
And when should people start?
If you're 35 or over, get checked, get on active prevention. The good news is you only have to check every 5 years. When you hit 60, okay, switch it to every 2 years.
Now, if there's one thing you want people to take away, what would it be?
Nobody should have to deal with the dementia phase. It's kind of like saying, let's wait to treat cancer until it's widely metastatic. Why would you do that? When you develop Alzheimer's, you go through 4 phases. You have a phase where you're asymptomatic, but you can pick up things in the blood work and spinal fluid and things like that. Then you have SCI, subjective cognitive impairment, means something's not quite right, but you're still able to score normally on cognitive tests. That lasts on average 10 years. Very, very treatable. The third phase is MCI, mild cognitive impairment. That means you're starting to score abnormally on the cognitive testing, but you still have your activities of daily living. You can still balance your checkbook and drive your car and do your job and all that sort of stuff. Then the final stage is dementia, where you're now losing those. You want to start through the first 2 stages.
In other words, early detection is everything.
Remember that when hemoglobin A1C appeared it was around the 1970s. Now you could see diabetes coming before you had full-on diabetes. Now you had pre-diabetes. Mm-hmm. So you don't ever have to wait to get the retinal damage, the vascular damage, the renal damage of full-on diabetes because you can pick it up early. That's exactly what's happening in Alzheimer's.
So here's what I hope you take from this video. Alzheimer's is no longer a death sentence. 84% of people in clinical trials improved. The protocol can outperform drugs by over 8 times. You can start today at any age over 35. Early detection saves your brain. Now, 5 years ago, I learned I had both genes for Alzheimer's, but Dr. Bredesen's work moved me from terror to empowerment. Remember Judy, the CIA analyst walking across America?
I can't believe it. I can't believe it. 2,800 miles. You are amazing.
And I'm pretty excited to share the news that Alzheimer's may now be optional. So don't wait for a diagnosis, get tested. Start the KetoFlex 12-3 diet, sleep 7 hours, move your body, manage stress.
Let's make sure that our brain span is as long as our lifespan.
And if this video opened your eyes, hit the like button, share it with someone it might help. It helps us reach more people who need this information. Also subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss future videos, and drop a comment. Are you gonna get tested? And what's your first step? Your brain can heal, the science is clear, the protocol works, so the choice is yours. Thanks for watching.